The galaxy has witnessed countless champions and villains across its long history, but few figures capture the imagination quite like Revan. A name whispered in reverence and spoken with dread, Revan stands as perhaps the most complex figure to ever walk the line between light and darkness. Neither purely hero nor simply villain, Revan's story transcends the typical boundaries we use to define those who wield the Force. To understand Revan is to understand that redemption and damnation are not destinations, but journeys, and that the greatest power lies not in the Force itself, but in the choices we make when wielding it. This is the complete history of the one known as the Revanchist, as the Prodigal Knight, as the Dark Lord of the Sith, and simply as Revan. The birth of a legend in the Outer Rim territories around the year 3994. Before the Battle of Yavin, a child was born who would reshape galactic history. The circumstances of this birth remain shrouded in mystery, lost to time and the chaos that would later consume the galaxy. We do not know the names of parents who brought this remarkable being into existence, nor do we know the world that first felt their presence. What we do know is that the Force burned bright within this child, a beacon that could not long remain hidden from those who devoted their lives to seeking such potential. The Jedi Order, in those days, served as guardians of peace and justice throughout the Republic. Their scouts traveled the known galaxy, searching for children strong in the Force, hoping to train them in the ways of the Jedi before fear, anger, and attachment could take root. When they discovered this particular child, they must have sensed something extraordinary. Perhaps it was the raw power that radiated from such a young mind. Perhaps it was the clarity of presence, the way the Force seemed to flow through this individual with unusual ease. Whatever the reason, the Jedi brought the child to their temple, and there the transformation began. The young Padawan who would become Revan trained under multiple masters throughout childhood and adolescence. Each instructor recognized exceptional potential, a hunger for knowledge that seemed insatiable, a mind that absorbed lessons with startling speed. Among these teachers stood one particularly influential figure, Jedi Master Kreia, a woman whose own complicated relationship with the Force would echo throughout galactic history. Kreia saw something in her young student that both impressed and concerned her. Here was a mind that questioned, that pushed boundaries, that refused to accept dogma without examination. On Coruscant and later at the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, the future Revan excelled in studies. Lightsaber combat came naturally, whether the elegant precision of Form 2 Makashi or the aggressive power of Form Vafaized Jem So. But combat skills alone did not define this prodigy. The young Jedi displayed remarkable aptitude and Force abilities that many masters spent decades attempting to perfect. Telepathy, telekinesis, Force persuasion, all these and more came with an ease that some found troubling. It was during these formative years that the future Revan formed a bond that would prove both blessing and curse. Another young Jedi, a boy named Alec from the planet Quelli, became fast friends with Revan. The two were nearly inseparable, their connection strengthened by shared frustration with what they perceived as the Jedi Council's excessive caution and unwillingness to act decisively in the face of injustice. Where Revan possessed brilliant tactical insight and Force mastery, Alec brought fierce loyalty and considerable physical prowess. Together, they imagined a galaxy where the Jedi actively defended the innocent, rather than merely contemplating the will of the Force from distant temples. But even as this friendship bloomed, Revan's masters grew concerned. The young Jedi's desire for knowledge seemed to know no bounds. Ancient Sith texts, forbidden techniques, the nature of the dark side itself. These topics fascinated Revan in ways that made the more conservative council members uneasy. They saw passion where they hoped for serenity. They witnessed pride where they sought humility. Yet Revan's commitment to justice seemed genuine, and the young Jedi's skills proved invaluable. So the Order continued training, hoping that wisdom would temper what they saw as dangerous curiosity. By the time Revan achieved the rank of Jedi Knight, the galaxy knew peace. The Republic had recovered from the devastation of the Great Sith War that had ended decades earlier. Trade flourished, worlds prospered, and the Jedi Order served as guardians who rarely needed to draw their lightsabers. For Revan and Alec, now both knights in their own right, this peace felt fragile. They had studied history. They had learned of the cycles of conflict that plagued the galaxy. They knew, even if others refused to acknowledge it, that darkness would rise again. They simply did not know from which direction it would come. Revan had achieved a remarkable reputation for such a young Jedi. Respected by peers, admired by younger students, the knight's voice carried weight in discussions among the Order. When Revan spoke, others listened. This charisma, combined with evident power and strategic brilliance, marked Revan as destined for greatness. The question that haunted some of the older masters was simple. Would that greatness serve the light or feed the darkness? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The revanchist movement, the peace that the Republic enjoyed, shattered like fragile crystal when warriors emerged from the unknown regions. The Mandalorians, a culture built upon honor through combat, began raiding worlds along the Outer Rim. These were no mere pirates or petty criminals. The Mandalorians brought devastating military might, sophisticated tactics, and a hunger for conquest that threatened to consume entire sectors of Republic space. The Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders, as they called themselves, followed a leader known as Mandalore the Ultimate. Under his direction, they swept through system after system, their victories mounting with terrifying efficiency. They crushed local defenses, enslaved populations, and claimed worlds as trophies of their martial prowess. The Republic military, unprepared for such aggression, fell back again and again. Billions of beings lived under the shadow of Mandalorian occupation, their cries for help growing more desperate with each passing month. Yet, when the Republic pleaded for Jedi intervention, the Jedi Council hesitated. The Council members had not forgotten the lessons of previous wars. They remembered how conflict corrupted even the most devoted Jedi, how the urgency of battle made warriors of peacekeepers, how the line between defender and aggressor blurred in the heat of combat. The Council sensed something deeper behind the Mandalorian aggression, a hidden influence they could not quite perceive. Until they understood this mystery, they refused to commit the Order to war. For many Jedi, this caution seemed like wisdom. But for Revan and Alec, it felt like cowardice. They watched as worlds burned. They heard the pleas of the innocent. They saw fellow Jedi torn between duty to the Council and compassion for the suffering. The contradiction gnawed at them. What good was the Force if its servants refused to act against clear injustice? What purpose did the Jedi serve if they stood aside while evil ravaged the galaxy? Revan began speaking out, first privately, then more publicly. The charismatic young knight's words resonated with Jedi who shared similar doubts. The Council's caution, Revan argued, was not wisdom, but paralysis. The Force did not demand that its servants contemplate evil from a safe distance. The Force called them to action, to defend those who could not defend themselves, to stand as shields against the darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. More and more Jedi listened. Younger knights especially found Revan's arguments compelling. Alec stood firmly beside his friend, lending his own voice to the cause. A movement began to form, Jedi who saw themselves not as rebels, but as the Order's truest defenders. They called themselves revanchists, taking their name from Revan, the charismatic leader who gave voice to their convictions. The true turning point came on a world called Cathar. Revan and several followers traveled there, seeking evidence about Mandalorian atrocities. What they found exceeded their darkest fears. The Mandalorians under the command of the ruthless Cassius Fett had not merely conquered Cathar. They had committed genocide, wiping out almost the entire Cathar population. Millions of beings, men, women, and children, murdered simply to prove Mandalorian superiority. On that devastated world, Revan discovered something that would become iconic: a Mandalorian mask. Through the Force, Revan experienced a vision of the massacre. In that vision, one Mandalorian warrior had tried to stop the slaughter, flying their ship between Fett's warships and the defenseless Cathar, pleading for mercy. Fett had shown no mercy, killing the dissenting Mandalorian along with the Cathar they tried to protect. That lone Mandalorian's mask lay among the ruins. Revan picked it up, feeling the weight of it, feeling the sacrifice it represented. In that moment, Revan made a vow. The mask would be worn until justice came to the Mandalorians, until they answered for their crimes. The simple name Revan would be sufficient. No elaborate titles, no proud declarations. Just Revan and the mask that would become a symbol recognized across the galaxy. Armed with evidence of Mandalorian atrocities, Revan presented the findings to the Jedi Council. Surely, Revan argued, this changed everything. Surely even the Council could see that waiting was no longer an option. But the Council remained unmoved. They acknowledged the horror. They grieved for the Cathar, but they would not sanction Jedi involvement in the war. Their reasons remained mysterious, frustratingly vague. They spoke of greater dangers, of hidden threats, of the need for patience even in the face of atrocity. Revan left that council chamber knowing that patience had become impossible. The time for asking permission had passed. The time for action had arrived. Revan stood before the assembled revanchists, mask now firmly in place, lightsaber ignited, and declared that they would go to war. Not as rebels against the Order, Revan argued, but as its purest embodiment. They would do what the Council feared to do. They would save the Republic that the Council refused to defend. They would be the revenge against the Mandalorians that innocence demanded. The Republic welcomed them with desperate gratitude. The Mandalorians had pushed Republic forces to the brink of collapse. Entire sectors teetered on the edge of Mandalorian conquest. The arrival of Jedi warriors, led by the brilliant and charismatic Revan, changed everything. Suddenly, the Republic military had champions who could match Mandalorian ferocity, tacticians who could outthink Mandalorian commanders, Force users who could inspire courage in the most demoralized soldiers. Alec remained at Revan's side through it all, the loyal friend who had become a formidable warrior in his own right. Together, they formed the core of a movement that would save the Republic from the Mandalorian threat. But salvation, as they would discover, often comes at a terrible price. The path to victory would lead them through darkness deeper than either could imagine, to choices that would haunt the galaxy for generations. The revanchist movement had begun. The Mandalorian Wars had found their champions, and Revan, wearing the mask of a fallen Mandalorian, stepped fully into the role that destiny had prepared: war hero and tactician. The introduction of Revan and the revanchist Jedi into the Mandalorian Wars marked an immediate shift in the conflict's momentum. What had been a steady Mandalorian advance across Republic space suddenly met fierce resistance. Revan's strategic brilliance became apparent in those first engagements. Where Republic military commanders saw only overwhelming Mandalorian force, Revan identified weaknesses. Where others advocated defensive stands that would inevitably fail, Revan planned counteroffensives that caught the enemy unprepared. The Mandalorians prided themselves on their warrior culture, their martial discipline, their ability to adapt to any opponent. They had crushed every force the Republic sent against them. But Revan brought something they had never encountered: a strategic mind that thought several moves ahead, combined with force abilities that disrupted their most reliable tactics. Revan did not merely react to Mandalorian movements. Revan predicted them, understood them, and turned their own strengths into vulnerabilities. Battle after battle, system after system, Revan's forces pushed the Mandalorians back. Republic worlds that had lived under occupation for months or years suddenly found themselves liberated. Refugees who had fled Mandalorian aggression returned to rebuild their homes. The tide of the war had turned, and all the galaxy knew who deserved credit for that reversal. Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa officially recognized what everyone already acknowledged, appointing Revan as Supreme Commander of Republic forces in the year 3962, before the Battle of Yavin. But victory came at a cost that extended beyond casualties. Revan, who had defied the Jedi Council out of compassion for the innocent, found that war demanded moral compromises. To defeat the Mandalorians, Revan had to think like the Mandalorians. The brilliant tactics that won battles often involved sacrifices that would have horrified the young Jedi Knight who had first spoken out against the Council's inaction. Entire squadrons sent on missions with low survival probability. Planets left vulnerable to draw Mandalorian forces into traps. Civilian populations used as bait for military objectives. Alec, now calling himself Malak, to escape an arrest warrant issued by the still disapproving Jedi Council, watched his friend change. The passionate advocate for the innocent was becoming a cold strategist who calculated acceptable losses with disturbing ease. The Jedi who had worn a Mandalorian mask as a symbol of justice began to embody qualities more associated with Mandalorian ruthlessness than Jedi compassion. Power in the Force, always strong in Revan, grew stronger still, fed by the intensity of constant conflict and the embrace of whatever tactics victory required. Other revanchist Jedi noticed the change as well. Some, troubled by the darkness they sensed creeping into their leader, departed. Others, believing that victory justified any method, followed Revan deeper into moral ambiguity. None could deny the results. Revan was winning a war that the Republic had been losing. The Mandalorians, for all their prowess, could not match a commander who seemed to understand warfare at a level that transcended ordinary military thinking. The war approached its climax. Revan had spent months maneuvering the Mandalorian forces, pushing them toward a confrontation that would decide everything. The location Revan chose was deliberate, a world called Malachor V, a planet already dark with Sith history, a place where the Force itself felt corrupted. Here, Revan would face Mandalore the Ultimate in final battle. Here, the Mandalorian Wars would end. But Revan held a terrible secret. On Malachor V, in utmost secrecy, Revan had overseen construction of a superweapon. The mass shadow generator, as it was called, could manipulate gravitational forces with catastrophic results. When activated, it would crush everything on the planet's surface, would tear the world itself apart, would kill indiscriminately Mandalorian and Republic soldier alike. Revan had entrusted only one person with the actual activation, Meetra Surik, a female Jedi general who served as Revan's most loyal commander aside from Malak. The trap was set. Revan lured the bulk of Mandalorian forces to Malachor V, promising them the decisive confrontation they sought. The planet's surface, filled with warriors from both sides, the largest concentration of military might assembled since the war began. In orbit, fleets positioned themselves for battle. The Mandalorians believed they would finally crush the Republic's resurgent forces. They believed their superior martial culture would triumph. They believed Mandalore, the Ultimate, their greatest warrior, would prove victorious in single combat against the masked Jedi who led their enemies. Revan faced Mandalore the Ultimate on Malachor V's scarred surface. Around them, armies clashed in brutal melee. Above them, starships exchanged devastating fire. But in that moment, the war came down to two individuals: the Mandalorian warlord who had led his people in conquest across the Outer Rim, and the Jedi who had defied the Council to stop them. The duel between Revan and Mandalore the Ultimate has become legend. Two masters of combat, two brilliant strategic minds, two individuals who represented the highest pinnacles of their respective cultures. Lightsaber against Beskad, Force powers against Mandalorian technology, Jedi training against warrior instinct. The fight raged across the battlefield, both combatants pushing themselves beyond normal limitations. But Revan had prepared for this moment with absolute focus. Every scenario had been considered, every tactical advantage identified. When the moment came, Revan struck with precision, cutting down Mandalore the Ultimate. As Mandalore lay dying, he whispered something to Revan, something that would prove fatally important. The Mandalorians, Mandalore confessed, had not attacked the Republic of their own initiative. They had been manipulated, urged into war by another power, by Sith Lords who remained hidden in the unknown regions. The Mandalorians had been pawns, tools used to weaken the Republic in preparation for a greater assault. To prove his words, Mandalore gave Revan coordinates, the location of Rekiad, where evidence of this Sith manipulation could be found. Revan absorbed this revelation even as the signal went out to Meetra Surik. The mass shadow generator activated. The planet Malachor V began tearing itself apart. Gravitational forces beyond comprehension crushed ships, armies, everything. Mandalorian warriors died by the thousands. Republic soldiers, Revan's own troops, died alongside them. The revanchist Jedi, who had followed Revan into this battle, many of them perished as well. Mitra Surik, who had activated the weapon at Revan's command, felt every death through the Force, a wound that would scar her forever. The devastation exceeded even Revan's calculations. Malachor V became a graveyard, its surface shattered, its core exposed, its atmosphere blasted away. Both fleets suffered catastrophic losses. The Mandalorians, however, lost everything. Their leadership destroyed, their greatest warriors killed, their military might broken beyond recovery. The Mandalorian Wars ended in that instant, ended in an act of destruction so massive that both victor and vanquished could barely comprehend its scale. Republic forces that survived declared Revan a hero, the savior who had ended the Mandalorian threat. The Mandalorians themselves, those few who lived, saw Revan as the ultimate warrior, the one who had bested Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat. Even in defeat, they recognized Revan's martial supremacy. Revan commanded the surviving Mandalorians to disarm, to scatter, to abandon their crusade. Then Revan took Mandalore's mask, the symbol of their leader's authority, and hid it where no Mandalorian could find it. But the Jedi Council saw something very different. They saw a Jedi who had defied their wisdom, who had led thousands of their brothers and sisters into war, who had embraced tactics that bordered on atrocity. They saw the mass shadow generator's use as exactly the kind of corruption they had feared. They summoned Revan, Malak, and the surviving revanchists to Coruscant to answer for their actions. Revan and Malak refused. They had other plans born from Mandalore's dying words. They would find the hidden Sith, would confront this threat before it could destroy the Republic they had fought so hard to defend. Only Mitra Surik answered the Council's summons, bearing the guilt of those she had killed, seeking some kind of absolution. The Council stripped her of the Force and exiled her. Unable to comprehend how a Jedi could create such a wound in the Force and survive, Revan and Malak took the remaining revanchist fleet and departed for the unknown regions. The Republic believed they pursued scattered Mandalorian remnants. The Jedi Council assumed they sought to delay judgment for their actions. No one knew the truth. They were following Mandalore's coordinates, seeking evidence of the Sith manipulation he had described. The Mandalorian Wars had ended. Revan had achieved victory. But that victory had cost something precious, something that could never be recovered. The compassionate Jedi who had defied the Council out of love for the innocent had become a ruthless strategist who calculated acceptable losses in the millions. The power required to win the war had changed Revan in fundamental ways. The darkness that the Council had feared was no longer a distant possibility. It had already taken root, growing stronger with each moral compromise, each embrace of brutal necessity. And in the unknown regions, something waited, something that would take the darkness already present in Revan and transform it into something far more terrible than anyone could imagine. Journey into darkness. The coordinates Mandalore the Ultimate provided led Revan and Malak first to Rekiad, a frozen world where ancient Sith had once held power. There, amid ice and ruins, they discovered evidence that confirmed Mandalore's confession. The Mandalorians had indeed been manipulated, pushed into war by a Sith influence that traced back to a hidden empire. Record spoke of a reconstituted Sith civilization that had survived in the unknown regions, rebuilding its strength, while the Republic and Jedi believed the Sith extinct. More troubling still, these records suggested that the Sith Emperor, behind this manipulation, possessed power that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen in generations. This was no ordinary Dark Lord of the Sith. This was an entity that had lived for over 1,000 years, that had consumed the life force of an entire planet to gain near immortality, that commanded an empire built upon dark side principles that made the old Sith teachings seem primitive by comparison. Revan understood the implications immediately. The Mandalorian Wars had been a test, an experiment to gauge the Republic's strength. When the real Sith invasion came, it would not be mere warriors seeking honor through combat. It would be a tide of darkness led by an immortal emperor who had spent a millennium preparing for conquest, unless someone stopped him. The journey deeper into the unknown regions proved treacherous. Hyperspace navigation in this region of space remained unpredictable at best, deadly at worst. Strange anomalies, gravitational distortions, phenomena that defied conventional physics, all these hazards claimed ships that ventured too far from known space routes. But Revan possessed exceptional skill in navigation, aided by the Force and by tactical brilliance that extended even to stellar cartography. Slowly, carefully, Revan and Malak led their fleet through dangers that would have stopped anyone else. Finally, they arrived at Dromund Kaas, capital world of the hidden Sith Empire. The planet itself spoke of dark power. Constant storms lashed its surface, electrical discharges that seemed almost alive in their fury. The dark side saturated every rock, every plant, every structure. The Sith had built their new civilization in a place where the Force itself bent toward darkness, where the ambient energy strengthened those who embraced the dark side while sapping the will of anyone foolish enough to cling to the light. Revan and Malak did not arrive with military force. They came quietly, posing as mercenaries, spending weeks observing Sith society from within. What they learned both impressed and horrified them. The Sith Empire was not the chaotic mess of squabbling Dark Lords that history described from previous Sith civilizations. This empire had order, hierarchy, purpose. At its apex sat the Emperor, a being spoken of in whispers, rarely seen, but whose will dominated every aspect of Sith life. The two Jedi recognized that direct confrontation would be their only option. They had come to stop the Emperor, to end the threat before it could destroy the Republic. An assassination, clean and final, removing the head of the serpent before it could strike. Through careful observation and strategic thinking that had won the Mandalorian Wars, they identified the Emperor's guards, studied the Imperial Citadel, planned their infiltration with meticulous detail. They were walking into a trap. The Emperor had known about Revan and Malak from the moment they entered Sith space. One of his Imperial guards had reported every meeting, every conversation, every detail of their planned assassination. When Revan and Malak finally made their move, breaching the Imperial Citadel and confronting the Emperor in his throne room, they found him waiting, prepared, ready to demonstrate why he had ruled unchallenged for over a millennium. The power gap between the two Jedi and the Sith Emperor exceeded anything they could have anticipated. Revan, who had defeated armies and conquered the greatest Mandalorian warriors in single combat, could not touch him. Malak, whose strength had grown formidable during the wars, proved equally helpless. The Emperor did not simply overpower them through superior force ability. He reached into their minds with a mental domination so absolute that their wills crumbled before him. In those terrible moments, the Emperor broke them. He stripped away their resistance, their loyalty to the Republic, their commitment to the Jedi Code. He showed them visions of power beyond imagining, of galactic conquest as inevitable and right, of the dark side as the only true path to strength. Most devastating of all, he demonstrated that everything they believed about good and evil, light and darkness, had been lies told by inferior beings who feared true power. The mental domination was not instant. The Emperor spent time breaking down their identities, reconstructing their philosophies, turning their own experiences against them. Remember the Jedi Council's refusal to act while innocents died? That hesitation, the Emperor whispered, came from weakness inherent in the light side. Remember the terrible choices required to win the Mandalorian Wars? Those were merely the first steps toward understanding that compassion was a chain, that mercy was for the weak, that power was the only truth that mattered. He anointed them as Sith Lords. Revan became Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith. Malak became Darth Malak, Revan's apprentice. The Emperor commanded them to return to known space as vanguard for his eventual invasion. Their mission: find the legendary Star Forge, an ancient superweapon built by the Rakata species, and use it to construct a fleet that would crush Republic resistance. When the Republic lay broken, when the Jedi Order had been destroyed, the Emperor would reveal himself and claim dominion over the galaxy. Publicly, the Emperor announced to his empire that the two spies who had infiltrated their world had been executed deep within the Citadel. Privately, he sent Darth Revan and Darth Malak back to Republic space, their minds twisted into service of the dark side, their considerable abilities now devoted to Sith conquest. The Emperor believed he had created perfect weapons, Jedi Knights corrupted so thoroughly that they would never question their new purpose. He was wrong. The Emperor had underestimated the strength of will that had allowed Revan to defy the Jedi Council, to win the Mandalorian Wars, to accomplish what others called impossible. That same iron determination, that refusal to be controlled by anyone, remained buried beneath the Emperor's mental domination. As Revan and Malak traveled back to known space, as they began following the Emperor's commands, something stirred in the depths of their corrupted minds. Slowly, incrementally, Revan began to break free. Not completely, the Emperor's power was too great for total liberation, but enough to reclaim autonomy, enough to remember that following orders had never been Revan's way. Malak followed Revan's lead as he had throughout the Mandalorian Wars. Together, they shook off the Emperor's direct control while maintaining the corruption he had inflicted upon them. They remained Dark Lords of the Sith. The Emperor's teachings had taken root too deeply to simply discard, but they would be their own masters, would forge their own empire, would conquer the galaxy for their own purposes, rather than as pawns of a hidden emperor. The dark side had claimed them, perhaps irreversibly, yet they would wield it as they saw fit, not as servants, but as masters in their own right. Their first objective remained the Star Forge. The ancient Rakatan superweapon represented exactly what they needed, a means to build military might that could overwhelm the Republic quickly, decisively, before the Emperor could make his own move. Across the galaxy, Revan and Malak searched for clues to its location. The Rakata, in their prime some 25,000 years earlier, had left star maps on key worlds. These maps, when combined, would reveal the Star Forge's hidden location. Dark Lord of the Sith, the quest for the star maps took Darth Revan across the galaxy. Dantooine, where Revan had once trained as a Jedi, held one such map in ancient ruins beneath the surface. Tatooine's desert wastes concealed another in the wreckage of a Rakatan city buried by sand. Kashyyyk's towering forests protected a third in a temple that had stood since before recorded galactic history. Manon's endless oceans hid a fourth in the ruins of a Rakatan structure at crushing depth. Each world told a story of the ancient infinite empire, of the Rakata at the height of their power before plague and civil war destroyed their civilization. The Rakata had been a force-sensitive species, entirely aligned with the dark side, who used their abilities to build technology far beyond what the galaxy has known since. The Star Forge represented the pinnacle of their achievement, a space station the size of a small moon, powered by a nearby star, capable of producing an infinite fleet of warships, weapons, and war materiel. The station fed on the dark side, drawing power from negative emotions, hatred, fear, anger, pain. In turn, it corrupted those who used it, pushing them deeper into darkness in an endless cycle of mutual reinforcement. When Revan and Malak finally located all the star maps and discovered the Star Forge orbiting the Star Lahan, they stood before something unprecedented. The station had lain dormant for millennia, but its automated systems remained functional, ready to serve anyone with the power and knowledge to command it. Darth Revan wasted no time. The Emperor had commanded them to find this weapon. Instead, they would use it to build an empire that would rival his own. The Star Forge began production. Warships poured from its construction bays, perfect in every detail, requiring no resources beyond stellar energy and the dark side power that Revan channeled through the station. Armies of battle droids marched from assembly lines that had produced the Rakatan military forces ages ago. Weapons, armor, supplies, everything an empire needed materialized at Revan's command. With this endless military might at his disposal, Darth Revan declared war on the Republic. The Jedi Civil War, as historians would call it, began with coordinated strikes across multiple sectors. Revan's strategy showed the same brilliance that had won the Mandalorian Wars, but now serving a darker purpose. World after world fell to Sith conquest. Republic fleets engaged Revan's armada and found themselves overwhelmed by sheer numbers, by ships that could be replaced faster than they could be destroyed. Yet something distinguished Darth Revan's conquest from typical Sith aggression. While the Sith forces struck hard and fast, while they crushed military resistance without mercy, they did not simply destroy. Revan ordered the strategic targeting of military assets while specifically avoiding unnecessary civilian casualties. Infrastructure critical to post-war rebuilding factories, agricultural centers, transportation networks, these remained intact wherever possible. Conquered worlds found Sith occupation harsh, but not genocidal, demanding obedience, but not mass slaughter. The pattern confused many. Sith Lords throughout history had reveled in destruction, had proven their power through atrocity, had built empires on foundations of fear and suffering. Darth Revan seemed different. The conquest methodical rather than chaotic, strategic rather than sadistic. Some whispered that Revan had not truly fallen, that some vestige of the Jedi Knight remained beneath the dark side exterior. Others argued that this was simply Revan's tactical genius applied to empire building. Why destroy infrastructure you plan to rule? The truth lay somewhere between. The Emperor's corruption ran deep. The power of the Starforge corrupted further, and Revan's embrace of the dark side was genuine. But Revan had not forgotten the dying words of Mandalore the Ultimate, had not forgotten that the Emperor waited in the unknown regions. Subconsciously or deliberately, Revan was preparing the galaxy for that greater threat, forging a stronger, more unified civilization that could resist when the true Sith Empire finally revealed itself. This pragmatic approach to conquest did not extend to the Jedi Order. Revan knew that the Jedi represented the greatest threat to Sith dominance. The war against them proved especially brutal. Jedi enclaves fell to concentrated assault. Revan hunted down Jedi Masters personally, dueling them with the same skill that had once defended Republic ideals. Many Jedi died. Others, confronted by their former hero, transformed into a Dark Lord, struggled to reconcile the contradiction. Some fell to the dark side themselves, joining Revan's growing ranks of dark Jedi and Sith acolytes. The relationship between Darth Revan and Darth Malak evolved as the war progressed. As master and apprentice, they should have displayed the unity necessary for Sith effectiveness. Initially, they did. Malak served loyally, commanding the portions of the fleet, leading assaults, demonstrating why he had been Revan's closest friend during the Mandalorian Wars. But the dark side breeds ambition, and Malak began to see his master not as the brilliant friend he had followed into war against the Mandalorians, but as an obstacle to his own ascension. Malak believed Revan had grown soft, that the strategic restraint in conquest represented weakness rather than wisdom. A true Sith Lord, Malak thought, would embrace destruction fully, would use the Starforge to reduce the Republic to ashes rather than preserve it for some future threat. The longer the war continued, the more Malak questioned why Revan did not simply overwhelm the Republic with the infinite forces at their command. The turning point came during a battle where Revan's flagship engaged Republic forces. Unknown to Revan, a Jedi strike team had boarded the vessel, led by a young Jedi named Bastila Shan, whose rare ability in battle meditation made her invaluable to the Republic's war effort. As this strike team fought through Sith defenses toward the command deck, as Revan prepared to face these Jedi personally, Darth Malak saw his opportunity: betrayal and redemption. Malak's betrayal came not in honorable challenge, but in treachery that even most Sith would consider dishonorable. As Revan stood on the bridge, preparing to confront Bastila Shan and her Jedi companions, Malak ordered his own ships to open fire on Revan's flagship. The bombardment was overwhelming, designed not merely to damage but to destroy. Malak believed he could eliminate his master and the troublesome Jedi strike team in one devastating strike, claiming the title of Dark Lord for himself. The bridge exploded around Revan, fire, vacuum, the screaming metal of a dying ship. Revan should have perished in that chaos, nearly did perish. The Dark Lord's body was flung through the wreckage, grievously wounded, barely clinging to life. The other Jedi in the strike team were not so fortunate. They died in the attack, killed by the same treachery meant to destroy their target. Only Bastila Shan reached Revan in time, whether through the Force guiding her or simple fortunate timing, or perhaps destiny asserting itself, she found the broken form of the galaxy's most feared Sith Lord. Every instinct screamed at her to let Revan die, to allow the Force to claim this servant of darkness. But something stayed her hand. Perhaps it was her Jedi training, the commitment to preserve life even in enemies. Perhaps it was something deeper, a connection she did not yet understand. Bastila used the Force to stabilize Revan's failing body, to keep life from fleeing entirely. In doing so, she inadvertently created something unprecedented, a Force bond between herself and the fallen Sith Lord, a connection that would link their destinies in ways neither could anticipate. She brought Revan aboard the escape shuttle, fled the dying flagship, and returned to the Republic with the greatest prize imaginable, the Dark Lord of the Sith, helpless and at their mercy. The Jedi Council faced an impossible decision: execute Darth Revan and make a martyr whose followers would fight even harder to avenge their fallen master, imprison the Dark Lord and risk rescue attempts that would sacrifice countless lives, or attempt something that many considered unthinkable: use the Force to erase Revan's identity, to rebuild a broken mind with a new personality loyal to the Republic. They chose the third option. While Revan lay unconscious, hovering between life and death, the Jedi Masters performed what amounted to mental surgery. They stripped away memories of being Darth Revan, of commanding the Star Forge, of falling to the dark side. They constructed a new identity, a loyal Republic soldier who had served with distinction. They implanted false memories of a normal life, of growing up on a simple world, of enlisting to defend the Republic against Sith aggression. When Revan finally regained consciousness, it was with no memory of who they had been, no recollection of the Mandalorian Wars, of being Supreme Commander, of the journey to Dromund Kaas, no knowledge of the Star Forge or the Sith Empire or the Emperor who waited in the unknown regions, just a Republic soldier recovering from injuries sustained in a Sith attack, determined to continue serving the war effort. The Council placed this reborn Revan under Bastila Shan's supervision, hoping that the Force bond between them would allow her to guide and influence the former Dark Lord. They also hoped that Revan's subconscious memories might lead them to the Star Forge's location, allowing the Republic to destroy the source of the Sith's endless fleet. For months, the plan worked perfectly. Revan served aboard Bastila's ship, the Endar Spire, never questioning the identity the Council had fabricated. When the ship came under attack by Malak's forces above the outer rim world of Taris, Revan escaped with a Republic soldier named Karth Onasi, then helped search for Bastila in the criminal-infested city below. After rescuing her from a swoop gang, Revan continued to serve, traveling to Dantooine, where the Jedi Council gave official recognition to latent Force sensitivity and began Jedi training. This reborn Revan proved exceptionally skilled, mastering techniques with a speed that amazed the instructors, wielding a lightsaber with precision that suggested deep familiarity despite claiming to be a novice. The Council recognized what they saw, not a new Jedi, but an old one remembering what had been forcibly forgotten. They sent Revan, Bastila, and their companions on a quest to find the star maps, ostensibly to destroy the Star Forge, in reality hoping that visiting these locations would trigger Revan's buried memories. The plan succeeded beyond their expectations. though not in ways they anticipated. As Revan visited each star map location, fragments of memory returned. On Kashyyyk, in Manayan's depths, across Tatooine's wastes, the veil between past and present grew thinner. Revan began experiencing dreams, visions of commanding vast fleets, of wielding power that made the current war effort seem insignificant by comparison. The Force bond with Bastila deepened as well, complicated by emotions neither fully understood, connection that transcended their supposed relationship as master and student. The truth finally emerged aboard the Sith flagship Leviathan. Darth Malak, who had captured Revan and Bastila, could not resist revealing the deception. He explained how he had betrayed his master, how the Jedi had rebuilt Revan's broken mind, how the Republic soldier fighting against the Sith had once been the Dark Lord commanding them. The revelation shattered everything Revan believed about identity, about the war, about the months spent serving what had once been an enemy. Bastila confirmed it. The Council confirmed it. The hero Revan had believed himself to be was a lie, a fabrication covered in a darker truth. The real Revan had been a conqueror, a tyrant, a Sith Lord responsible for countless deaths. Every action taken since awakening had been built on a foundation of manipulation and deceit. The psychological impact could have broken anyone. Many would have collapsed into madness, unable to reconcile two contradictory identities. Others might have embraced the darkness again, accepting that Darth Revan represented their true self and the Republic soldier merely a Jedi trick. But Revan did neither. Instead, the former Dark Lord made a choice that would define the rest of their existence. Revan chose the light, not because the Jedi had programmed that choice, not because manipulation left no alternative. Revan chose the light because, even knowing everything that had been done, even understanding the full scope of crimes committed as Darth Revan, the months spent fighting for the Republic had shown another path. The connections formed with companions, the Force bond with Bastila, the opportunity to save rather than conquer, these had value that the dark side could not match. This was not the naive choice of someone who had never known darkness. This was the deliberate decision of someone who had embraced the dark side fully, who had commanded armies of conquest, who had wielded power that most could barely imagine. Revan knew exactly what was being rejected and chose the light anyway. The choice made it genuine in ways that no amount of Jedi manipulation could fabricate. Return of the prodigal knight, with identity restored and purpose renewed, Revan continued the quest for the Star Forge, but now with full knowledge of what awaited. The final star map, the key that would reveal the superweapon's location, lay in the unknown world of Lehon, the ancient Rakatan homeworld. There, Revan and companions found not the advanced civilization that had once dominated the galaxy, but remnants of that greatness scattered among barbaric tribalism. The Rakata had fallen far from their apex. The plague that stripped them of force sensitivity, combined with civil war and the collapse of their technology, had reduced them to primitive survivalism. Two factions remained: the Elders, who retained some knowledge of their history and sought to destroy the Star Forge to atone for their species' crimes, and a Black Rakata, who had devolved into violent tribalism and wanted only resources and conquest. Revan, in an echo of the choices that had once defined them as Dark Lord, could have exploited the Elders' desperation, could have used their need to access the Temple of the Ancients for personal gain. Instead, Revan chose to help them genuinely, promising to indeed destroy the Starforge once it had served its purpose in ending the war. This small mercy, this decision to honor a promise to fallen remnants of an ancient evil empire, demonstrated how far Revan had come from the Dark Lord, who would have seen the Rakata as tools and nothing more. The Temple of the Ancients held the key to disabling the disruptive field that prevented ships from approaching the Starforge safely. Within that temple, Revan faced one final test. Bastila Shan, who had been captured by Malak and tortured into falling to the dark side herself. The woman Revan loved, corrupted by the same darkness that had once claimed the former Dark Lord, now served as Malak's apprentice and offered Revan one last chance to reclaim their position as Dark Lord. The battle between Revan and the fallen Bastila ached with tragedy. Here stood two people connected by force bond, by shared experience, by emotions they had barely begun to acknowledge before darkness claimed one of them. Bastila struck with anger born of betrayal, convinced that the Jedi had manipulated them both, that their connection had been nothing but another tool for council control. Revan defended while pleading for Bastila to remember who she truly was, to not make the same mistakes that Revan had made. In the end, Revan's words and the strength of their connection broke through Bastila's corruption. Not completely, she was too far gone for immediate redemption, but enough that she could not bring herself to kill Revan, enough that doubt crept into her conviction. When Revan departed to face Malak, Bastila remained behind, wrestling with the darkness within herself, trying to find the strength that Revan had shown in choosing the light. The Battle of Rakata Prime raged in orbit around the ancient Rakatan homeworld. Republic and Sith fleets clashed in the kind of massive engagement that defined major wars, both sides throwing everything they had into this final confrontation. The Starforge produced ships for Malak's forces as fast as Republic guns could destroy them. But Bastila, finding that strength at last, used her battle meditation on behalf of the Republic, turning the tide just enough to give their fleet a chance. Revan infiltrated the Starforge itself, moving through the massive station's decks toward the final confrontation with Malak. Along the way, Dark Jedi and Sith apprentices attempted to stop the intrusion. All fell before Revan's restored mastery. This was not merely the skill that had defeated Mandalore the Ultimate. This was something more, a Jedi who had walked through darkness and returned to the light, who had tasted the power of the dark side and chosen to reject it, who wielded the Force with the wisdom that only such a journey could provide. The final confrontation between Revan and Darth Malak was intensely personal. Here stood former friends who had defied the Jedi Council together, who had fought side by side through the Mandalorian Wars, who had faced the Sith Emperor together. Malak believed that Revan's choice to reject the dark side proved weakness, that true power required embracing darkness fully without reservation. Revan stood as living proof that strength could exist without corruption, that the dark side's promises of power were lies that ultimately enslaved rather than liberated. They dueled across the Starforge's command deck with a ferocity that pushed both to their limits. Malak, empowered by the dark side and by the Starforge's corruption, struck with raw power that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Revan countered with technique refined by complete mastery of both light and dark, understanding how to draw on the Force without being consumed by it. When Malak attempted to drain the life force of captured Jedi to restore himself, Revan freed those prisoners, denying the dark side its fuel. In the end, skill and wisdom triumphed over raw power and corruption. Revan struck down Darth Malak, ending the threat of the fallen apprentice who had betrayed his master and seized the Sith Empire for himself. Malak's last words carried acceptance of his defeat and acknowledgement that perhaps Revan had always been the stronger of the two. With Malak dead and the disruptor field disabled, the Republic fleet destroyed the Star Forge. The massive station, which had stood for over 30,000 years, which had built the fleets of the ancient Infinite Empire, and more recently served as the heart of Revan's Sith Empire, exploded in a cataclysm that could be seen across the Lehun system. Its destruction marked the end of the Jedi Civil War, the endless reinforcements that had made Sith victory seem inevitable, the end of an ancient darkness that had corrupted everyone who sought to wield it. Revan returned to the Jedi as a hero, honored with the Cross of Glory for actions that had saved the Republic. But more important than any military decoration, Revan found personal redemption. The Jedi Council, despite their manipulation, accepted that Revan had genuinely chosen the light. Bastila, saved from the dark side's grip, stood beside Revan as something more than fellow Jedi, their Force bond having evolved into something deeper, something the Council's philosophy of non-attachment could not easily accommodate. When Revan and Bastila announced their intention to marry, the Council faced yet another impossible decision involving the former Dark Lord. Jedi tradition forbade marriage, forbade attachments, forbade the kind of love that Revan and Bastila openly proclaimed. But Revan had proven that love could be a strength rather than weakness, that positive emotions could anchor someone against the dark side rather than leading toward it. Reluctantly, the Council approved the marriage on the condition that Revan not spread this heretical philosophy among other Jedi. For a brief time, peace reigned. The galaxy began rebuilding from years of warfare. The Republic slowly restored its strength. The Jedi Order, nearly destroyed during the conflict, started the long process of recovery. And Revan, for the first time in years, knew something approaching normal life, a home, a wife, the prospect of a family. But the peace could not last. Memories continued to return, more complete with each passing day. And with those memories came terrible knowledge. The Sith Emperor still waited in the unknown regions. The threat that had manipulated the Mandalorian Wars, that had corrupted Revan and Malak, that commanded an empire built on 1,000 years of dark side mastery, that threat remained. Sooner or later, the Emperor would make his move. When he did, the Republic would not be ready. Revan saw only one option. The final quest, 2 years after the Battle of Rakata Prime, after 2 years of marriage to Bastila, after building a life that finally seemed free of darkness, Revan made the most difficult choice yet. Bastila was pregnant, carrying their child, building toward a future they had barely dared to hope for. Walking away from that future tore at Revan's heart in ways that battling Sith Lords never had. But the nightmares had grown worse. Visions of the Sith Emperor, of the hidden Sith Empire, of an invasion that would dwarf anything the galaxy had witnessed, haunted Revan's sleep. The knowledge that action was required, that someone had to confront this threat before it destroyed everything, weighed heavier than any burden carried during the wars. Revan understood what others did not. The Emperor represented a threat beyond normal comprehension, something that would require everything Revan had learned through both light and darkness to overcome. Revan departed for the unknown regions, leaving behind a wife and unborn child, leaving behind the life of peace that had been fought for so desperately. The pain of that departure stayed with Revan throughout the journey, a reminder of what was being protected, of why confronting the Emperor mattered more than personal happiness. The journey took Revan to Nathema first, the dead world where the Emperor had performed his terrible ritual 1,000 years ago. Walking across a planet completely severed from the Force proved uniquely disturbing even for someone who had experienced as much darkness as Revan had. The complete absence of life, the void where the Force should flow, the sense of wrongness that permeated every atom of that scarred world, all of it testified to the Emperor's power and malevolence. From Nathema, clues led to Dromund Kaos. Revan moved carefully this time, avoiding the mistakes that had led to capture and corruption before. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Emperor's stronghold, get close enough to strike, and destroy him before he could dominate Revan's mind again. Armed with knowledge of how the Emperor's powers worked, determined to succeed where the younger Revan had failed, the redeemed Jedi Knight prepared for what would be the final confrontation. But Revan was not alone in this quest. Two others joined the mission: Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile who had activated the mass shadow generator at Revan's command during the Mandalorian Wars, and Lord Scourge, a Sith Lord who had come to believe that the Emperor would destroy the entire galaxy if not stopped. An unlikely alliance, a redeemed Sith Lord, an exiled Jedi, and a Sith who feared what his own Emperor had become. Together, they infiltrated the Imperial Citadel during a moment of chaos as the Emperor dealt with a conspiracy among his Dark Council. They fought through Imperial guards whose loyalty to the Emperor granted them supernatural resistance to Force powers. They reached the throne room where Revan had once fallen to corruption, where the confrontation a decade ago had ended with mental domination and transformation into a Dark Lord. The battle was brief. The Emperor, even caught unprepared, proved overwhelmingly powerful. T-3M4, Revan's loyal astromech droid who had accompanied the mission, was destroyed with a casual gesture. Mitra Surik fell to Lord Scourge's lightsaber when the Sith Lord experienced a vision showing that Revan could not defeat the Emperor this day, that success would come from another hero in the future. Better to betray the mission now, Scourge concluded, than to doom the galaxy by forcing the Emperor to destroy them and accelerate his invasion plans. Revan, weakened by the Emperor's Force lightning, watched Mitra die from Scourge's betrayal. Before Scourge could complete the betrayal by killing Revan as well, the Emperor stopped him. The Sith Lord had proven his loyalty through that betrayal, the Emperor declared, but Revan was too valuable to simply kill. The Emperor imprisoned Revan in a place designed specifically for eternal captivity, the Maelstrom Prison, a space station hidden within a nebula so treacherous that navigation was nearly impossible, became Revan's tomb. Using Sith alchemy and technology, the Emperor kept Revan in a state between life and death, sustained indefinitely through unnatural means. Then the Emperor began feeding on Revan's Force essence, draining power while simultaneously probing Revan's mind for information about the Republic and the Jedi Order. But the connection went both ways. While the Emperor tried to extract information from Revan, Revan could influence the Emperor's thoughts in turn. Not enough for freedom, not enough to stop the planned invasion, but enough to delay it, to plant doubts, to exploit the Emperor's fear of death that had driven him to seek immortality in the first place. Every time the Emperor planned to launch his assault on the Republic, Revan's influence would whisper reasons to wait, to plan further, to prepare more thoroughly. For 3 centuries, this psychological war continued. Revan sustained by Sith alchemy, sustained by the Emperor's need to keep draining power, sustained by Mitra Surik's spirit refusing to pass into the Force and instead lending her own energy to keep Revan strong enough to resist. 300 years of torture, of mental probing, of the Emperor constantly trying to break through Revan's resistance to gain the intelligence he sought. 300 years of Revan holding firm, delaying the inevitable, buying time for the Republic to grow stronger even as Revan's own strength slowly wore away under the endless assault. Legacy and resurrection. The Great Galactic War eventually came despite Revan's best efforts. After 300 years of delay, the Emperor's patience finally ran out. The reconstituted Sith Empire revealed itself to the galaxy, launching a massive invasion that caught the Republic unprepared. The war lasted 28 years, devastating both sides, ending in a treaty that split the galaxy between Republic and Sith Empire. The worst fears that had driven Revan into the unknown regions had come to pass, but the delay had mattered. The Republic that faced the Sith invasion was stronger than it would have been 3 centuries earlier. The Jedi Order, though nearly destroyed in the fighting, survived, and Revan's influence had another effect. The Emperor, distracted by Revan's mental influence, fathered 3 children with a Zakul knight named Senya Tiral during this period, creating complications that would later undermine his plans. Revan remained imprisoned until a strike team working on behalf of the Republic during the Cold War that followed the Great Galactic War finally freed the ancient Jedi from the Maelstrom prison. After 3 centuries of captivity, Revan was finally free. But freedom came at a terrible cost. The torture, the endless mental warfare, the centuries of imprisonment had fractured something fundamental. When Revan's spirit split upon release, the dark side aspects separated from the light. One part became one with the Force, finding the peace that had been denied for so long. The other part, consumed by hatred for the Emperor and determination to ensure the ancient evil could never threaten the galaxy again, remained active. This dark spirit of Revan seized control of an ancient Rakatan facility called the Foundry, intended to use it to construct an army of droids programmed to kill anyone with traces of Sith ancestry in their bloodline. The plan was genocidal, aimed at wiping out the entire Sith Empire's population to prevent the Emperor from ever finding new servants. An Empire strike team infiltrated the Foundry and stopped this dark Revan, but the spirit escaped, still obsessed with destroying the Emperor. Years later, Revan's spirit returned, leading a cult of followers called the Revanites, comprised of both Jedi and Sith, who saw Revan as proof that one could transcend the traditional light-dark dichotomy. Their goal: resurrect the Emperor to a physical form vulnerable enough to be killed permanently. The plan nearly succeeded, with Revan engaging the Emperor's weakened spirit on Yavin 4. However, a coalition of both Republic and Empire forces stopped the attempt, recognizing that the resurrection would only strengthen the Emperor, rather than destroying him. In that final battle, something remarkable occurred. The light side spirit of Revan, which had become one with the Force, returned to merge with the dark side remnant. The two halves reunited, creating wholeness after centuries of fragmentation. In those final moments, fully restored, Revan spoke warnings about the Emperor's true nature and ultimate plans before finally passing into the Force completely, at last finding the peace that had been sought for so long. Revan's influence extended far beyond direct actions. Centuries after Revan's imprisonment, a Sith Lord named Darth Bane discovered one of Revan's holocrons. The teachings contained within helped Bane formulate the Rule of Two, the doctrine that would define the Sith Order for 1,000 years. Revan's philosophy that multiple apprentices inevitably united against their master became the foundation of Bane's reformation of Sith ideology. The legacy continued in other ways. Satele Shan, Grand Master of the Jedi Order during the Great Galactic War, was Revan's distant descendant through Bastila. Theron Shan, a skilled Republic operative, carried Revan's bloodline as well. The child that Bastila carried when Revan departed for the unknown regions became part of a lineage that would influence galactic events for generations. A legend transcendent. What makes Revan's story so compelling is not the power displayed or the battles won. It is the journey itself, the demonstration that redemption remains possible even after the deepest fall. That choice matters more than destiny. That strength can come from embracing both light and darkness without being consumed by either. Revan began as a Jedi Knight motivated by compassion for the innocent, became a war hero willing to make terrible choices to achieve victory, fell to the dark side through corruption that seemed absolute, returned to the light through choice rather than manipulation, sacrificed personal happiness to confront a threat that none else could face, endured centuries of torture to delay an invasion, and finally, after everything, found peace. In current Star Wars canon, Revan exists in an interesting liminal space. The character has been officially referenced with the Sith Eternal's Third Legion, named the Revan Legion in honor of the ancient Sith Lord. The reference in the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary confirms that Revan is considered a historical figure whose name carries weight among Sith cultists, even if the full story remains part of Legend's continuity. Whether Revan's complete tale ever becomes official canon matters less than the impact the character has had on Star Wars storytelling. Revan represents something essential about the Force and those who wield it. That light and darkness are not absolute categories, but choices, renewed every moment, that define who we become. The mask that Revan wore, taken from a fallen Mandalorian who tried to prevent genocide, became a symbol recognized across galactic history. Not just a symbol of the Dark Lord who conquered the Republic, but of the Jedi who defied the Council to save the innocent, of the redeemed hero who proved that no fall places anyone beyond salvation. So close your eyes now and let the story of Revan carry you gently toward sleep. Remember that every choice matters, that redemption remains possible, that the greatest power lies not in dominating others, but in mastering ourselves. Let these truths settle into your mind as consciousness fades, as you drift into dreams of a galaxy far, far away, where legends walk among the stars and leave footprints that never fade. If you enjoyed this journey through the life of Darth Revan, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless more stories from Star Wars lore to explore, characters whose lives echo across generations, events that shape the galaxy in ways both visible and hidden. Join us again as we continue diving deep into the history of a galaxy where the Force flows through all things, where heroes and villains are often the same people at different times, and where the line between light and darkness remains forever contested. May the Force be with you always, and may your dreams be filled with the wisdom that comes from understanding that we all contain the capacity for both darkness and light, and that choosing which to embrace defines not just our fate, but who we truly are. Sweet dreams, and may your journey through the Force be as meaningful as Revan's.